that just clicked for me. It was pretty scary to start that off, but I absolutely loved it in the end, and I've been able to draw a lot on some of those failures and how I went about growing my business. I was able to start letting go of my ego that I didn't need to be right. Design thinking really helped with that. The professor where I learned design thinking, he's actually developed his own one, and it's called the DUCTRI model. And so the reason why I like that is, and so that's a good overview of how to innovate or solve a complex problem using DUCTRI.
Welcome to the Nomad Solopreneur Show. I'm your host, Gabe Marusca, joining you on your solopreneurship journey as you build, grow, and learn. Today, we have with us Vaughan Broderick, who sold his business, backpacked 23 countries, got an MBA, and then launched into the world of design thinking and innovation. His goal is to inspire people like you to think differently about life and business. He shared today with us the DUCTRI design thinking model created by Dr. Christian Walsh, a model that considers the resources and implementation phase that are critical to innovation. Let's jump straight into it. Hey Vaughan, welcome to the show.
Hi Gabe, how are you? Great to be here.
Great to have you. I'm really excited to share your story. Can you please tell our listeners, how do you end up in this position that you are today?
I started off in the printing industry, doing an apprenticeship. And as you do in the trades, and if you do all right in that, you tend to move up into middle management and such. And so I was in that industry for a number of years, and then the organisation I was working for, they were purchased, and the new owners, I didn't really fit in with the new culture that was there. So I decided to exit, and I had a real big career pivot, and I decided to start my own business. And I'd always liked property, so I thought I'll get into property and I'll get close to property and all that sort of thing. So I took 6 months going back on the job in the evenings, and during the day I'd go out and interview different occupations like solicitors or real estate agents and mortgage brokers and that. And so after about 6 months I decided, yeah, look, I can do this. And so I took the leap, and it was a lot tougher than I thought, you know. So I had that business for about 12 years, and after the first six months, I really wondered what I'd done. Basically, I'd sold my house and was using the equity out of that to fund living till I got going, and basically almost lost all of that money. But got a bit of traction in the end, and after about 2 years, really established the business and it did really well for the next sort of decade. And then about 5 or so years ago, I really worked out that I wasn't enjoying that sector anymore. I really enjoyed helping people, but decided to exit there, and I had no idea what I was going to do, but basically just had a chat with my wife and said, hey, look, I'm not happy, I'm not enjoying it. And she said, okay, that's fine. And I said, what are we going to do? And she didn't know, but I'd always had in the back of my mind that I wanted to do an MBA. So I thought I'll go do that. And so I started the first year as a part of the executive program as a sort of older student, and absolutely loved it. So I started thriving in that sort of environment. And as I was handing over the business for sale, we thought, hey, look, let's go and do a little bit of travel as well. So we actually took a year off in between the first year of the MBA and the second year. And we traveled 23 countries, just backpack, my wife and my 7-year-old son at the time. We started off in South America. My wife is from Chile. So we traveled a bit of South America, some Central America and Cuba, into the United States and a bit of Canada and across into Europe. And we ended up coming right back into Chile later on after about 12 months. And so I got home just before the COVID outbreak. And I was continuing on my studies during the second year. In that second year, I was quite fortunate that the MBA program at my university was very much at the forefront of innovation and entrepreneurship, and they'd made design thinking a core component of the program. And that just clicked for me. I think it was really the combination of creativity and different ways of thinking about business and solving complex problems that sort of really resonated. Even though I was in the finance sector for 12 years, I wasn't that good at finance, but I was pretty good at having a chat with people and looking after them and helping them grow their money and such. So Yeah, it just really resonated. And so after finishing that year with the consulting final project, so I did a design thinking project in the social services sector where the group of organisations who were the sponsors of the project, they had an idea regarding how to digitise a particular asset, or it's called life storybooks, that young people that are in state care are entitled to have. So that was a project I took on. And then after that project, I ended up continuing on into that social services sector, helping them redesign their services for about another year and a half, until eventually there was a role within the health system as a design thinking coach came along. And so I absolutely jumped at that, and that was a great opportunity. I started out in that role, and that was for about 18 months as well. But during that time, I also started to do a lot of mentoring, and that would be MBA students, or it could be for startups. And I'd do some presentations and design thinking and that sort of thing. I was a business coach as well on our business. And so I was volunteering in a lot of ways. And then I decided I want to get really clear on some of my thinking and that. And so I started looking into LinkedIn a bit more, and obviously come across Justin Walsh and enjoyed a lot of his posts. And I thought, I'll give this a go. It was pretty scary to start that off, but I absolutely loved it in the end. And once I got into a bit of a groove, worked out a little bit of a style, I think that keeps evolving what I want to talk about. And because of that, I was offered a role at the university in their Centre of Entrepreneurship. So I've been doing that now for about 6 weeks. Also, as part of that role, I get to teach design thinking to some business master's students as well. In a way, it's been full circle for within about 3 or 4 years. Yeah, that's kind of how I arrived here.
That's quite a journey in such a short time. I feel like you literally lived a lifetime of business in just few years. Of course, I'm talking just after the backpacking period. How influential do you think it was, your previous experience in all the other businesses, to advance so quickly from that MBA to actually going full circle back in the university?
What I didn't mention earlier is also when I did have an earlier business when I was about 28. I thought I'd start a printing business and had no idea how to run a business at all, and that failed. And so that was a good lesson about understanding the market and customers and such. So when I had the opportunity to restart another business, I wouldn't necessarily say that I had it down pat in any way. I certainly learned the hard way in terms of how important networking was, and also doing a great job for customers and the word of mouth can build. And that's really how I grew that business. But I certainly took a few lessons from getting closer to customers and understanding their needs and focusing all about the customer's needs, and then shape your business around that. And so that was the approach that I took into that business. And yeah, that was pretty successful after a decade there. But looking back, I think the one thing that I would have encouraged my earlier self would be to be a lot more curious early on, and to be trying different environments, different things of interest, because I think you become a lot more well-rounded earlier. And so when I look at this transition into the MBA, I was super nervous. I didn't know if I could foot it with people who had been in that environment before, and the academic way of writing and all that sort of things. But after the first subject, I just loved it and thrived in that environment. I think I've been able to draw a lot on some of those failures and how I went about growing my business. I was pretty determined. In those early years, I'd be coming home at 11 o'clock at night a couple of times a week. So I took that into my university approach. But I think I also took a lot more maturity this time, and I was open to a lot more ideas, and also I was able to start letting go of my ego that I didn't need to be right. Design thinking really helped with that. So I'm really lucky I found a mentor, and he's really helped me develop and also opened up a lot of doors for me as well.
That's amazing. And I think design thinking is probably one of the most underrated skills. And I would like you to dive a bit deeper into design thinking and the way you apply this to not only your business and your life, how you can use innovation by design and design thinking to actually build a sustainable business and a life that you don't want to run away from.
With design thinking, Gabe, it's been around for a long time. It became pretty popular in the 80s, 90s scenario. Could have those dates wrong, but it became pretty popular. And if you search on the internet, there's a lot of models out there, and they tend to have 5 phases, and a lot of it always starts with empathy and that sort of thing. And however, the professor of where I learnt design thinking here, he's actually developed his own one, and it's called the DUCTRI model. And so the reason why I like that is he's really combined the core phases. DUCTRI stands for discovering, understanding, creating, testing, resourcing, and implementing, is including repeat at the end, because even though it's a kind of a linear looking model, it's very iterative. But he's also captured the core mindsets and principles of design thinking in the model, and also aligned it with the desirability, feasibility, and viability that you're probably familiar with as well. So I think he's really got quite a comprehensive model, even though there's nothing wrong with the other models there, but that just happens to be the one that I follow. So if we go through using that model, just to explain how design thinking works, perhaps for people in use. So if you imagine that you've got a business problem, fairly complex, it's not a simple sort of cause and effect, but very unclear about what the root cause might be. So what you might look to do would be in that discovering phase. So that's about going really divergent, going really wide, exploring that whole problem space. And there's something called the beginner's mind, and that's having that real curiosity for the problem space and asking more and more questions. And so some of the things that you might use in that phase would be a lot of interviews. They'd typically be one-on-one interviews with a particular user, and there could be multiple users within that problem space. And then also observations. So you might be like a fly on the wall and just watching what people are doing, along with inspiration from other sectors. So somebody could be solving a similar problem, and you might go and look and learn what they're doing and how that might be applied potentially as well. And also looking at sort of extreme users where somebody's actually already trying to solve the problem themselves, and they can actually in the end become early adopters of any sort of solution potentially. So you learn a lot. So it's all exploring that space, and then once you've done that, then you're starting to come into a convergent phase. And so what we're trying to do there is just really you've been building up a whole lot of empathy for the users, and you have certain tools, and that could be, say, an empathy map. It could be developing out a persona, journey maps. A favorite one of mine is jobs to be done. And so there's various tools that you can use to help make sense of all that data and what is the core insights, the core needs, and ultimately the core problem. And so what you might do then once you've used those tools is come up with a sort of anchoring point of view statement. So that might be like user needs this because of this. And so that might be a surprising insight. And so that's really what you're putting the stake in the ground about what your view is of this core problem. And so once you've got that, then we need to move into the creating phase. Here it's about not just limiting ourselves to the first idea that we have. Often we'll stop there, but it's about continually building and adding to either one or several ideas and adding new ideas all the time. So again, there's various things that you can do there. Often we might start with a springboard statement, starting with how might we? And so that's quite aspirational, but also a collaborative way of framing a problem. You might be doing things like brainstorming or brainwriting, whereas you might be writing your ideas in as an individual, that sort of thing. Making sure that you were taking care of introverts as well. I'm an introvert, and it's important that we use techniques to make sure that introverts can get what's in their head out onto paper, even while you're doing a team activity. And so once you've got lots of ideas, then you perhaps go through a little bit of a process of what are the most interesting ideas that we would like to try, the ones that we think might be feasible. And so then you're into the testing phase. So testing phase is effectively building a prototype and looking at the assumptions around how you think your solution might be, and testing, breaking out those assumptions or extracting them out, and then creating a hypothesis around those assumptions and testing them. And so you can test them in various ways, and it depends whether it's in that desirability or viability phase of a business, but it doesn't have to be too complex. What's important really is that you get your ideas out into the world early and often and get feedback. What I've found in developing my own business early on, but also with the startups that I'm involved, is we try and hold on to those ideas as opposed to letting people engage with them. We're often quite apprehensive that people are going to steal our ideas. Usually that doesn't happen, and what's often more valuable is that you share that and get the collective insight from the people that are interacting with your idea. So it could simply be a drawing, or it could be a landing page that perhaps you've created. It could just be developing out a value proposition statement and just see if that resonates with people. But ultimately, it's also about de-risking and making sure that we're spending as little investment of money, time and resources to learn what we need to learn to either validate that idea and to continue on, or whether we should look at alternatives. So it's about de-risking and investing only as we get more and more evidence. Here is the concept of lean, about this build, measure, learn cycle. And so that whole investment over time as you learn more and gain more evidence as to whether you should continue. And so you might start off with a drawing, but then actually move into a minimum viable prototype in the end. But you can do other things such as mock-ups and fake doors and that sort of thing. So that's a real interesting space that I love helping startups. But then after that phase, we're really into resourcing. And so starting to consider, well, not just how much we fund this, how are we going to build it, but what are other things like social capital are we going to need? Are we going to need to be connecting with some people, perhaps entering some competitions and having some social proof, all that sort of thing, in order to be able to transition this idea into the world properly? So like a tool that's quite useful there is a pre-mortem technique. Imagine 12 months into the future and your project's been a total failure. Why might those reasons be? And just working out how you might mitigate all of those or eliminate them. Within that, you're also looking at competitors and such. So you're starting to move more in towards that sort of business model creation, but also looking at implementing. So a really core problem within innovation and startups is that once you've actually found that people actually care about your idea and that they want to purchase it, and you're perhaps getting a little bit of traction, but this whole implementation piece is effectively changing people's behavior more often. So imagine you're in a organization and you've got a new way of working or a new way of solving the problem. We need to get people on board to adopt the new way. And so that's all about changing behaviour. And so a model I do like in there from Chip and Dan Heath, and they come up with the switch model, which is direct the rider, motivate the elephant, and shape the path. That is about giving clear, succinct instructions. It's also about that creating that identity about why we should change. And then shaping the path is making things really easy for people to make that decision. So in there comes things like nudges and that sort of things. And then the final phase is also the repeating. So it's just really a nod to the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, it's not linear. It's, even though we've got those phases, very much you could be circling back throughout the whole process as you get more and more clarity that your idea is actually solving the problem in the right way. And so that's really a good overview, I think, of how to innovate or solve a complex problem using DUCTRI.
I'm curious if you can apply the same model to less complex things, or you think it's too time consuming. For example, validating a business idea that you have that is not to build a startup or something, maybe just a personal business, like a one-person business. It's advisable to use the same DUCTRI model, or do you think it's too time consuming or not really suitable for less complex problems?
While it's really useful in that complex space, solving complex problems, innovation, etc., what I've found is the more I'm using it, the more I'm using it every day in my own life, even for simple things. So what I find is I take more time to be curious and just not jump to conclusions. And so it's about changing your own mindset about how you approach things in life. So I certainly would still use it in everyday life and absolutely within small businesses, but you might just use one part of it. It doesn't necessarily mean that you use all of it. It could just be you're looking to make a decision, so you just spend more time understanding potential. What is that problem space? What are our potential options before you narrow down and make that decision? So yeah, I certainly find that I use the mindsets and some of the methods in everyday life.
That's the thing, right? Because we often rely too much on assumptions or to biases to make decision. And in reality, if we can use proven processes, proven models like this one, especially into the personal branding space, a lot of people come with ideas and they go full in. They create, digital products, spend hours or months recording online courses without validating actually that idea. Applying models like this, I think it's really useful. And as you mentioned, in real life as well. And what will be your recommended resources for our listeners to dive even deeper into different maybe models of design thinking, not necessarily only in DUCTRI, but maybe different models, different approaches, and even around Ikigai, if you can share some resources.
I had a good think about this earlier, and I think it'd be useful just to share sort of three that were really influential for me and in my journey. And part of it is around design thinking. But so as far as design thinking goes, there's a fantastic book from Tom and David Kelly, and it's called Creative Confidence. And so that's a really good starter for anybody looking to get into design thinking. And look, I use it all the time now. But Tom and David, they are the founders of IDEO. They're a global design thinking organization, and they certainly helped popularize design thinking. But it's all about getting your creativity going and that whole curiosity piece. And so it's a fantastic book. Another one which might surprise you is also The Future with Chris Do. So I know he's been a guest on the show, Gabe. And look, Chris Do he probably doesn't know, obviously, but he has been hugely instrumental for me in my journey and my decision to actually take the leap and start posting on LinkedIn. I came across Chris on his YouTube channel and actually just started learning so much, even though he's doing business for creatives. And I consider what I'm doing is a little bit of the opposite, is helping bringing creative skills into the business world. But I've learned so much that's complementary even to some of the MBA side of things. And he's also an introvert as well, I believe so. And probably the third thing is another book. This is a strategy book by Roger Martin and A.G. Leffley. It's called Playing to Win. And Roger he's a leading thinker in the Business Thinkers top 50, I think it is. And so he's frequently in the top 5 sort of business thinkers in the world. I really resonate with the way Roger thinks about strategy, and it's very much a design thinking philosophy and emergent strategies rather than creating a very long strategic plan. He's all about learning as we go, and basically a strategy should be on an A4. And it's a strategy, it's quite simple in terms of you're looking for what to do and what not to do, the choices. And he really has come up with a good way of sort of categorizing 5 sort of different decisions that you need to do. The core of it is where to play and how to win. But I really resonate with Roger's style, and it's all about the iterative learning, testing as you go, and finding your way to a more competitive sort of business model.
That's an amazing one. And I noticed that you mentioned in your newsletter as well, that part, and personally I learned so much from it. And talking of which, can you please tell our listeners where they can connect with you?
At the moment, I am on Twitter and dabbling in a little bit of Threads, but the main place really is on LinkedIn. I post pretty much daily. I have a website as well, which I put newsletters and other sort of articles on there, so you can find me there, and that's vaughanbroderick.com. And Probably also, just to let you know, is that over the last 6 months, I've interviewed some of New Zealand's high-performing executive leaders. I was really curious about the problems that they're facing in this environment and how they respond to those changes. And it's available on the website very shortly, probably by the time the episode comes out, it's called Leadership in Disruptive Times. That's free to everybody who subscribes to the newsletter as well.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. And I noticed that you have quite a lot of free resources on your website, and anyone listening, if you want to dive deep into innovation and design thinking, Vaughan is your man, and check out his website to go through that. And to wrap up things, I'd like you to give a small challenge to those listening that they can apply in less than 24 hours to actually start applying into their own business and life the model that you described today, DUCTRI design thinking.
If it's okay, I'll break the rules, but they're interconnected. So I've got two, and one is around that ikigai. So I challenge everybody that if looking at changing careers or starting a business is to go out and explore everything that you're interested in. So write that down and then just choose one and start experiencing in that and work out if that's something for you. So in the first sort of 24 hours, you can map out everything you're interested in. As far as a business idea, if you do have a business idea, then what I'd suggest that you do is, what is the simplest way that you can convey that, whether it's through a picture, creating a simple storyboard, or even a slide deck, and do that, and then go out and find 5 people, not your friends, but 5 people who you think that they are your end user, and just let them experience it and get some feedback.
That's brilliant. I love how actionable this is. And without overthinking this process, you can apply quite easily in one day. Thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom today with us. Can't wait to share with our audience. And thank you for coming.
Gabe, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks very much for inviting me on.
My pleasure. Thanks for listening, everybody. Make sure to check the show notes where you'll find direct links to the tools and resources mentioned in this episode, and much more. If you enjoyed this podcast, make sure to subscribe to your favorite podcast station to not miss when we drop the next one. We have lots of exciting guests and surprises for you coming up. This is your host, Gabe Marusca, with the Nomad Solopreneur Show. Until next week, pura vida!